Okay, guys, before we jump into this week's podcast, remember, as always, to subscribe, to the podcast on YouTube or iTunes or where else are we? Anchor, Spotify, wherever you're listening and consuming our content. Also to subscribe to our game-changing weekly e-letter for men that goes out on Tuesdays and Fridays at 10 a.m. UK time to guys all around the world. Just hit the show notes below or www.wholemanacademy.com/movement to get our lovely e-letter. Right, let's jump in.
Whole Man Academy, because the world needs strong men. Whole Man Academy is changing the game for men around the world. It's for guys who want to live an epic life of fun and adventure, no matter what. We believe deep down, all men want to go on their own hero's journey to becoming resilient, confident, fearless, and fulfilled. Listening to be inspired by guys who don't settle for living a life of mediocrity. This is your call to action and call to adventure. Are you ready?
Okay, so this is the Whole Man Academy podcast, episode 104. My guest today, all the way from the States, is Justin Stenstrom, the host of the Elite Man podcast. He's the founder of Elite Man Nutrition, Elite Man Magazine. He's an author, entrepreneur, speaker, and plenty more. We're going to get into all of this, what it takes to be a man and what's life like out there at the moment. So, mate, how are you and exactly where are you?
I appreciate you having me on, man. I'm doing great. And I'm coming from Boston right now, which I would guess is probably similar to your weather right now. We're up and down, but today's a little rainy, kind of cold, but I think in like 2 days, it's going to be like 90 degrees. It's going to be beach day. So,
right.
We have the goods and the bads over here, just like you guys.
That's pretty, everything in the UK, if it gets too cold, everything stops. And if it gets too hot, everything melts. It's embarrassing,
Really?
Melt and, the trains stop if there's leaves on the line and stuff. And the more I traveled around the world, I realized how crap the UK was at dealing with any hot or cold weather. And I was going to ask you, have you been to the UK at all?
Actually, no, I haven't been to Europe, believe it or not.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely on the bucket list.
Yeah. And if you did come over here, do you have anywhere? That's why it's always interesting to talk to guys, especially from the States. I spoke to Joe Rodonis a while ago, who's based in New York, and Steve, who's in or just outside of New York, actually. And it's just interesting to talk to guys from the States because, a lot of the guys in the States aren't desperate to necessarily kind of get out because it's so big. Whereas over here, I can fly to various European cities in an hour or two or something like that. Yeah. Whereas when I went to, where did we start off? We did like Peru and places like that, but then we came over and did like LA, Alcatraz, Yosemite, etc. And you realize what an enormous place the US is compared to the little island.
It's true, 100%. And it's kind of cool in a way. You guys get to hop around from country to country. We just basically do state to state, which is very similar, but I think a lot different in a lot of ways. You guys have more differences in culture between, countries, obviously, than we would with states. But US is so massive. Like you said, you can go, 6-7 hour plane ride to LA and it's a totally different land out there. And then you go halfway between that's the Midwest, all the fields and the country folk and all that stuff. And then you go down south and they have a completely different way of speaking English and they're more, hospitable and they're nicer, everything's slower. I went to Atlanta about 5 years ago for a conference and it literally took me 3.5 hours of being at Staples to grab something that I had already ordered the day before. And I would just go into there and pick it up, but everybody was just slow and taking their time. I was in there for 3 hours. So, that was a little frustrating coming from someone up north where everything's quick, everybody around here, we go fast, but I did how sweet people are down there and, Southern hospitality is real. So you go anywhere in the United States, you're going to get a little bit different culture, a little bit different customs and, people and stuff. So it's really cool.
Yeah. Nice.
But yeah, I would actually like to go to UK at some point, Ireland, because I have a heritage from Ireland.
Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned Peru. I've been to Peru because my mother's side is actually from Peru. She came from Peru. I've been there and a few other places around islands and stuff.
Yeah. I think that's one of the big things, especially in this last 2 years where it stopped people from traveling. For me, I always say life should be a set of experiences knitted together, going and trying to travel or do adventures and experiences. And, so many people have been stopped from flying around the world in this last 2 years, which I know, for some people, you might not, like for us, just as we had kids, or our first child, we went traveling just before then because we had no mortgage, no jobs, no ties at all. But that's one of the big things I've kind of missed, is even just getting away to some, even if you're going to Spain or somewhere, just to go and chill out for a bit and have some proper weather. But let's get into the main reason I first found you was, the Whole Man Academy is all about getting guys together to talk and helping them find their own version of an epic life. And I remember listening to, I can't remember, it was a long time ago, one of your podcasts, and being like, I like this guy, he's talking sense. And I noticed, a couple of different guys that you had on. I know it's not just guys you have on the podcast, but that, Wim Hof and people like that some really, really good names. So take me back to how you even got to start the podcast, because I'm so interested in this.
Well, believe it or not, a few people even know this, but the podcast actually started as more of like a dating podcast for men, like a dating advice podcast. So yeah, that was the ancient days. I don't even know when I started. It's probably like 7 years ago or so. And I was just kind of like, helping guys out with confidence issues and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, let me try this podcast thing. I heard a few podcasts. So they were fairly kind of new at the time too. There was only a few real big ones. And this was before like Joe Rogan was even big. I mean, he had his podcast, but it wasn't really like what it is today. And people didn't really know him. Tim Ferriss, I think, had just started his around that time. And I was like, let me try this out. And I started, dabbling with it a little bit. And the dating thing, I think I did like maybe 15 episodes of the dating advice stuff. And then like after a while, I'm like, all right, this is kind of getting old. I'm, as I cover a lot of things in the podcast now. I'm like thinking of all these different topics I wanted to cover. And I'm like, dating is cool and everything. And, I was single back then and it was good. But at the same time, I'm like, this is pretty boring for me as like the host. I can't keep talking about the same shit.
Yeah.
So I slowly started getting like different guys on and different, backgrounds and stuff. And, after that, it just like totally had a rebrand of it into like Elite Man instead of just like a dating focus. It was Elite Man, where you're covering all these different things: health, fitness, business goals, leadership, confidence, all these things.
Yeah.
And from there, it really just took off. I started getting all these good guests and, the Wim Hofs of the world and all these other guys we've had on the show. And, it's been a lot of work and a long like journey to get to the point where we're at today. But it's been fun because it's been a great way to meet people, connect with different people. A lot of these people you look up to for years, you're like now talking to them for an hour, 2-3 hours. I had Anthony William on my show and he's like my number one health guy. And I was like reading all this stuff and following all his books and doing his diets and everything. And then I got to end up talking to this guy for 3 hours one day. A few years ago, and it was like really cool. Like if you couldn't pay this guy, actually, like he won't even take like consultations of like $20,000-$50,000 consult. He won't even take any money to do consultations because he's so busy. He's working with like billionaires and celebrities. But here I am on my podcast, and I talked to the guy for 3 hours for free. It's incredible. Priceless. Yeah, it really is priceless. And then I'm actually kind of friends with him. He gave me his number and stuff. We talk every once in a while, so it's just cool. Like the ability to connect with people and meet these people that are really changing the world in a lot of ways. And all of a sudden you get access to them and you get to like connect with them and make your own little impact on the world. And we've done good things with the podcast, but that's really just the beginning. There's a lot more things coming up that I think it's kind of propelled me into doing.
Oh, do you know what? You nailed it there. That's one of the big things when I get asked, we're what episode 104 now, and we're going for kind of like 2 years. So it was a kind of March 2020. But, one of the things I say is that my network has kind of exploded in that time with the 100 guys that you could now reach out to. And I was writing about it for our eLetter. We send out every kind of Tuesday and Friday to guys all around the world, actually. But funny thing is about a quarter of our readers or listeners are actually female. Which is,
wow.
With a Whole Man Academy podcast, and it's men talking to men about men stuff.
Yeah.
But a quarter of the listeners are female, which is
that's great.
Interesting one. But
that is good.
Exactly the same for us. I actually wrote about it today, which goes out tomorrow. Like when I'm doing mentoring with a guy, I'm like, I haven't got the answers. No one has. But if I don't know it and I can't help you, I now have all these different men from, crypto experts and business and entrepreneurs and footballers and Maori warriors and special force, all these different guys that you could just email and be like, hey, I've got this issue. Do you reckon you could give me some advice on it? Yeah. And it's like us now, now we've connected. You never know where the next step is at some point further down the line, where you happen to be in London or something like that, and there's some connections. But I was going to ask you, with the podcast, was there ever an episode where kind of you saw a sudden spike in views, downloads, interest that kind of really helped, or was it just a gradual process?
I mean, there was definitely a bunch of those ones. Like if I had, and not everybody does actually. Maybe like half the people will do it, will actually like share it. Like if you have a big guest come on, and you always want people to share the podcast just to get the word out anyways, whether they're big or small, or have a big or small audience. But there was definitely a few, like some of the, I remember like Dr. John Gray when he shared it. I believe Ty Bollinger, the guy who's the truth of cancer, the truth about cancer, when he shared his, when Anthony Williams shared the podcast that we did. I mean, these guys have like million followers on Facebook and Instagram and newsletters, email lists, like, million follower email list. So when they put it on the email list, I mean, you get a big spike in views and stuff and watch it and downloads. But yeah, it's funny because like when you're in the beginning of the stages, you're like, all right, if I just have this one guest on, he's going to change the whole outcome of it. You're going to go viral. And that does happen if you're real lucky, it happens to someone, and people put up a stupid TikTok video and they go viral. Next thing you know, look at like the stupid Island Boys, they have that ridiculous video and all of a sudden they're celebrities overnight.
Yeah.
And so it does happen. Like people go viral, and a lot of people go viral for a lot of bad reasons. But, from what I found in my experience, most people, especially in the podcast world, you're not going to blow up from like having a big name guest, even if it's huge. You're most likely not going to blow up from that, but you will get spikes, and those spikes over time do add up. Like, a little spike here, a little spike there, and then consistently staying with it and doing it every week, you're eventually just going to continue to grow like a rising tide type of thing. Yeah. But from my experience, I haven't had like just one guest like blow up the show. It just hasn't happened.
It's so interesting to hear, and I've enjoyed talking to different guys who run either little podcasts or some that are much bigger, because you get the kind of that similar story. They say there might be one, but it often depends on if the guest has got a big following and if they share it. And I think our biggest one was with David Gandy, who's kind of the international kind of model who has got about 1 million followers on Instagram. So when he shared it on there, we kind of very quickly went to something like 30,000 views or whatever it was. Which was, your graph goes.
Yeah, the straight line up, man.
And then 2 weeks later, it comes back down. And you're like, oh, right. So, no, it's good to talk about. And talking about guests, because some of the guys like Grant Cardone, who, I've kind of followed, for quite a few years. I think from when I started I was in Miami at one of the Tony Robbins events at Date with Destiny.
Nice.
Quite a few years ago, which is awesome. And I think I kind of found Grant Cardone around that time, maybe, if I start listening. What was he like to kind of A, deal with, and B, what was it like to interview him? Because do you ever get nervous about talking to these guys?
I'll be honest, I did in the beginning, not anymore.
Yeah.
Like you're always, even with this interview right here, like every time you step on the mic and you go live, you're always going to feel like a little bit of something, just because you're like, all right, people are watching this, but as you do it more and more, you don't even notice it anymore. So it's just like, maybe I was a little nervous for that, but I don't think so. And especially now, I mean, I've had some really big names on the past year or two, and it's like, I talk to them the same way I talk to anybody else. Like I go out for a conversation, I say hi. I mean, I talk to them the same exact way. In the very beginning, though, you're nervous because you have no credibility. You're like, all right, if this interview tanks, then, people are going to hate me and I'm never going to go and the show's going to tank. So you're like worried about it. But as you go on and you get more established and more credibility, you don't care about that and you don't get as nervous. And also you could do that right now. Like if you just start a new podcast and you have the mindset, like, all right, this is just a regular guy. Grant Cardone is just a regular dude. Yeah. If you have that mindset right away, you can just flip the switch and not care, not get nervous. But a lot of people need time to kind of establish themselves and build that credibility to feel confident about it. But Grant Cardone was a great guy. I actually didn't really know much about him when I interviewed him. I just knew he was like a big name, and I'm like, oh, he seems interesting. I didn't read his books or nothing. But I had him on the show and I actually loved him. I know I looked at a couple of his interviews and stuff. I knew he was very controversial, very like outgoing and kind of like in your face. And like kind of trying to prepare myself for that. And I actually thought he was going to kind of be a dick on the interview. So I'm like, all right, I'm kind of ready for him to be a dick. But I was talking to him, and 5 minutes into the show, I'm like, this guy's awesome. He's funny. He's very engaging. He's super interesting. He's a little like all over the place with stuff, but I like that. I mean, it just makes him more interesting to me. And then after I had him on the show, I kind of looked at his stuff more and more. And I watched that show he did. I forget what it was called, like 90 Day Millionaire or something, where he has like 90 days to make $1 million. And I was just gonna like, I was checking it out on like, like, oh, let me see what this is about. Someone Facebook recommended it or something. And next thing you know, I'm like binge watching. I never watched shows like that, but I ended up like binge watching this the next like 3 or 4 days. And it was because of Grant. He's so interesting. He's so smart the way he thinks, and he's a hustler. And it's like, wow, this guy's inspiring that he can do all these things and just make it happen. And I think they gave these guys $100 to start off, and they had to create $1 million business in 90 days. And he ended up doing like, actually, I will spoil it, because here's the spoiler. If you don't want to hear, if you want to watch the show, it's coming right now. I'm going to spoil it for you.
Yeah, bad luck.
But if you want to watch the show, skip over the next 30 seconds. But here's a spoiler alert. He actually, instead of doing the $1 million, he creates like a $5 million business within 90 days. So totally blows it out of the water. The other two competitors on the show, who weren't really as good, they barely did $1 million. And I think they kind of overassessed the businesses that they created. If you watch the show, I think you'll come up with the same conclusion. But long story short, the guy's incredible. I'm actually a big fan of his. I know he can kind of say things that are stupid sometimes, and he has a few bad interviews here and there, but overall, I think he's a great guy.
I think it's so interesting, and I always say now, with the rise of like YouTube and Instagram, etc., that you can immerse yourself. Let's say you're interested in business, you don't ever have to meet the person, but you can immerse yourself in their books, in their videos, in their podcasts, and what have you. And even with him, sometimes you'll, like a lot of guys, you might listen to an hour, but there'll be that one thing that he says, or for me, it's like the way he acts. He's very bullshit and doesn't give a fuck. And I think a lot of people, especially guys, could sometimes do with a bit of that rubbing off on them and not worrying what everybody else is saying and doing. But I wonder with the Elite Man, I mean, that's again going back to with the Whole Man Academy, we started off with it just getting guys together to talk, and kind of it was never a pure plan of where we were going to go with it. And then I was like, right, let's do events, and we have 12 events in London, and then we started the podcast and etc. Well, I wonder with you, when you move into working with men, I know you've got a good knowledge of nutrition as well. So was your background in nutrition, or to have got that decent level to be able to talk about that stuff as well as everything else?
Yeah. My background was in dating and just being good with, my background was in communication and communicating and being an effective communicator and reading people's body language and, using psychological principles and social principles to really benefit myself, and then to teach others how to do the same, whether that's with women or in business or whatever, in group settings, to just be more effective, an effective communicator and socially. That was my, and I just, that was all self-taught, and everything nowadays can be self-taught, and everything for me for the last, what is it, 2020, for the last like 15 years has been self-taught.
Yeah.
There's definitely a place for education and, university. And for some people, I think it's very overrated though. Mm-hmm. But, these things are all self-taught. And so the health thing for me was really just another thing. It's been a progression. It's been a series of things in my life where it was like, all right, this thing's popping up. I have to figure this out. And then I'll dive into it for 2-3 years and figure it out. And the next thing comes up. It's like, all right, I got to figure this out. 2-3 years. I got to do. So it just was another progression that came up in my life. I had a chronic disease, 5 years ago that really popped up and changed my life. And I had to figure out how to fix that. I mean, my brain was literally like atrophying, and I was having incredible migraines all the time. And I couldn't even like shut the door without getting a migraine. Like slamming the door shut would give me a migraine for a week. Playing pool, billiards, if I like hit the cue ball, that's the sensation of that cue hitting the ball, traveling up my arm would lead into the brainstem and give me a migraine for 2 weeks. I had to stop playing billiards for years.
What was it? So what was causing it?
It was so, working with Anthony and doing all that and reading all this stuff. And here's the thing. I went to 1 million doctors and spent 3 years and thousands of dollars trying to figure this out. And nobody could come up with a solution that would help me. I'd see a little bit of benefit here, a little bit there, but then it would come back. Mm-hmm. And nothing was permanent. Nothing could actually reverse what was going on. I used to box. I used to, fight. I did it for a few years, and I had a lot of fights. There was definitely some CTE damage to the brain, I think. And by the way, I did, 3-4 MRIs, went to I'm in Boston too. We are supposed to have the best doctors in the world. I went to the best doctors in the world, neurologists, all these things, neuroscientists I talked to. But nobody could figure out exactly what it was. And I ended up reading Anthony's book one day, and next thing you know, I'm learning all about these viruses and about these heavy metals that get lodged in the brain from birth. Actually, just at birth, you get passed down from your mother. You get a lot of the metals that are in their system, and viruses as well. So even so everybody's walking around with viruses: Epstein-Barr, cytomegalovirus, herpes 1, 2. There's multiple variations of it, shingles, all types of viruses. Everyone has dormant viruses in them.
Yeah.
And also heavy metals: mercury, aluminum, cadmium, lead. Mercury and aluminum are the two big ones. Mercury is the number one. It's super toxic to your cells, especially your brain, neurologically.
Especially people with them in here.
Yeah, dental amalgams.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fillings there. So you can't even just pull those out either, because then the mercury gets released, and it could be even more dangerous. So as bad as it is to have them slowly release into your system over time, it's actually probably safer to just keep them there than to pull them out, and then you get a whole burst of mercury. It can be very dangerous. But anyway, so in my situation, it was like I had these different things going on. I had the brain damage, and it wasn't like, I was like severely brain damaged, but I had decent brain damage from the boxing. I also had adrenal fatigue. I also had the main culprit, which was shingles and Epstein-Barr dormant in the system that had become activated. And these viruses, they travel up and down the nerve. So I had these that was where the pain was coming from, was these nerves that were super inflamed over the years of, poor nutrition and the damage itself and the adrenal fatigue. These nerves were super activated and inflamed. So any type of little thing I was sensitive to, and it would cause this cascade of inflammation that would lead into the brain and cause these migraines and sleep issues and all types of weird symptoms. I like to say, I don't like to say, but it's true. I had symptoms that is similar to early Parkinson's. And I had something called RBD, which is REM behavioral disorder, where you act out violent sleep episodes, and you can hit yourself and punch and kick and all kind. And that people that get that, 95% of them get Parkinson's within 10 to 15 years. Right. And I was getting this 5 years ago.
Yeah, not good.
So super scary. I mean, I wake up one day and I punched myself in the face viciously. I'm like, what the hell was that? And I'm like, whatever, it's probably nothing. And then 2 days later, I do the same thing, and I start doing Google searches, and I'm reading all these studies and this and that. And I'm like, holy shit, this isn't good. And so anyways, it was a combination of the damage from boxing. It was a combination of just having stress for numbers of years, wearing me down. And it was the viruses that had become activated, which are really the main culprits, causing all these weird neural issues and nerve problems that are, leading up and down the body and leading in the brainstem and et cetera. And then it was also heavy metals, mercury. I was actually a big tuna fish eater for years. I'd have a tuna sandwich every single day for probably 10 years. Yeah. So tuna is one of the worst foods you can have when it comes to heavy metals. So I had a lot of mercury stuck in the brain, and mercury won't just go out by itself. It sits there. You really got to pull it out with something like cilantro or wild blueberries or something like that. It takes a combination of things to really get it out of the system. And it takes time too. It doesn't just automatically come out a week after you start eating these foods. It takes, 6 months, a year, 2-3 years to do it all. So it was the metals too, and it was they were pockets in your brain. So people that have Parkinson's, they have heavy metals on which part of the brain is it? They have heavy metals mostly on the brainstem, the beginning of the spinal cord meets the brain, and it's right there. That's a lot of where the pockets of it will accumulate. People with Alzheimer's disease will have a lot of mercury, a lot of aluminum on the temporal areas, which is why it affects memory. Yeah. And then you have some of the other variations, not every Parkinson's is the same as, the next guy's Parkinson's, not every Alzheimer's is the same. And then you have all these other ones like multiple system atrophy, and you got the CTE, and you got MS is another one too, ALS, all these things are all heavy metal related.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of really like how much heavy metals do you have in your system, which ones are they, and where are they located? Where do they like kind of divot and stay in your brain? And so a lot of these things can be healed up when you do a combination of this diet and these protocols and these supplements. And that's what it took me to do. It took me 2 years of really doing this hardcore before I was able to kind of reverse it and go back to where I was. But it took me 5 years of trying a bunch of stuff that didn't work. And even years before that, where I kind of knew there was a problem going on, I just didn't really address it. But 5 years of really doing all this stuff before I was able to do it. And
I find
yeah.
it so interesting because, the more I understand about our health system worldwide, is that so much of it is, A, it's a business, but B, it's sticking a plaster over something instead of actually going to the root cause. I mean, I listened to some of your podcasts with Ty Bollinger, and, with cancer, it is a big business. And there's a lot of money to be made when people go on their treatment pathway, and often they're very quick to cut bits out of the body that have got a growth, a tumor or something, instead of actually saying, well, how can we treat it? So it's I know what you mean. It's one of those where, like for you, I'm sure that some of the other doctors, you realize that they're running a business, but also maybe they won't even attempt to think about the more natural remedies for things.
Yeah, it's sad. It's the US especially is, it leads the world in so many different categories, but certainly in health and medicine. I think we spend the most medicine. We definitely do spend the most on medicine, but have like the worst results as far as all the developed nations in the world. So we spend the most, but are in last place. And, it just goes to show you, because we're so pharmaceutical based, it's, throw a drug at this, throw a drug at that. And yeah, drugs certainly have a place, but most of these drugs aren't needed. They're not necessary. And a lot of these conditions, a lot of these issues, in fact, pretty much all of them can be reversed when you go the natural course. The thing is, the natural course takes a little bit longer because it's more gentle on the body. Instead of throwing like a hardcore drug at it, you go easy on the body. The body, works with the nutrient or the herb or the vitamin or whatever it is, and it slowly is able to heal it. Because that's really what it's all about, is having the body train itself again to heal itself. So you're like reconditioning the body to understand what the best protocol is for it to heal itself, because the body wants to heal. It wants to be in homeostasis. It wants to be healthy. The cells want to be healthy. You just got to feed it the right components to be at its best, and then it will heal itself. But a lot of these drugs actually hinder the immune system, hinder the body from healing itself, work against it. And they put like you said, is like a Band-Aid or a plaster on this thing to make it seem like things are okay. But deep down, that wound is just getting worse.
Yeah, it's, we try and cover a lot of topics on the Whole Man Academy with the eLetter. And again, you kind of said about, we talk about finance to health, fitness, nutrition, mindset, all the different things. But that's when I'm trying to impart knowledge on guys to say, like, you've got to go and do some of your own research. Don't just go to the doctor and say, can I have a pill for everything, and expect it, just to clear up. And actually on that, even on, when you talk about guys with like with fitness and nutrition, and we talk a lot about fitness on there, I'd wonder for yourself what your general kind of fitness level is, and also your like regime, like training regime, because the more guys I've learned from, I realize sometimes it's best to try and concentrate on the basics and not be too technical with things, and find out what you enjoy. So I wonder what works for you.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so for me, I mean, I actually had a background too as a personal trainer. So I did that for like 3 years, and I know all the exercises, all the, supersets, and the Tabata, and the high intensity ones, and the higher volume ones, the 1 set reps, all that. I mean, I've just tried everything under the, CrossFit. Even I did that for a few months as like a, experiment, but I've done it all. And at the end of the day, right now, I just go back to the basics of, I mean, cause I'm a busy guy. I know you're a busy guy. I don't want to spend hours and hours in the gym. I don't have that type of time. I want to get the most effect with the least amount of work.
Yeah.
And for me personally, it's like, all right, four times a week at the gym is great. That's all I need. I'm in there for probably 45 minutes a session, maybe an hour sometimes. I'll typically do some like a little bit of core work at the end of a full work of end of whatever body part I'm working on. If I'm doing a chest day, if I'm doing a back day, if I'm doing leg day, I'll throw in some abs at the end of it, and maybe a little bit of cardio I'll get with whatever else is in the equation there. But I find that I'm actually pretty healthy, and I get basically the same results I get today as 10 years ago when I was training, 2 hours a day in the gym, and just having protein shakes before, after, throughout the day, doing all these things. Like I might have been a tiny bit bigger, or a tiny bit more ripped, but that also could have more to do with the fact that I'm 10 years older, and my testosterone levels aren't quite as high, and this and that.
We're going to get onto testosterone. Yeah, it's good.
But yeah, but honestly, I've noticed I get basically identical results as I do now, with a lot less work than I did 10 years ago. And I have a lot more time to do all these other things I'm doing, like this interview, and some of the other things I actually enjoy, as opposed to sitting in the gym being miserable. And I also feel like it's easier for me to maintain this type of regimen, as opposed to being hardcore all the time, which is what I was for years, by the way. And when I was boxing, I was 6 hours a day I would train for that. So I mean, it's like I had that in my system. I could do that if I really wanted to. I also have I also have a life. I mean, I have things I also want to do besides working out. But that's like my fitness regimen. And then of course the health part is even more important. Really, it's the celery juice in the morning, and then the heavy metals shakes I have every day with the wild blueberries and everything. And I try to have like one meal of meat a day, and then the rest of it's like a lot of fruits and veggies, and that's basically the rundown of it. And supplements in between all that time, because I do have supplements throughout the day, like vitamin C and some of the basics.
Like zinc and things like that as well.
Zinc, multivitamin. I take lemon balm. I take B complex, ashwagandha, all those really good ones for your system.
It's funny you're listing we have two different online courses, but one of them is basically about helping a guy have more energy to do all the cool shit he wants to do in life. Because you're like, if you want to do all this stuff, but you're like, oh, I'm fucking tired all the time, you're not going to get it done. And we go through a lot of the supplements on that, because for most guys, you're just not educated on it, and you'll get, like, for example, like Men's Health magazine or something will do the odd article, but they're probably being paid by the people that they're promoting anyway, so it's not necessarily going to be the best quality. Everything's a business, and everything's got a dollar sign in front of it. So that's the other thing with guys. What we saw was some of them that we would talk to would feel like, you said protein shakes. Sometimes I'd say to people, you've got to actually work out as well. Like you can't just have your protein shakes. And I worked with a guy once who was a big guy, but I mean, he was overweight, and he was like, right, fuck it, I'm gonna get big. And I was like, great, like if that's the motivation that's going to drive you on. So he came the next day and he had like brand new, like 100-pound trainers. So okay. And then a big thing of like Maxi Muscle, protein shake, which is just full of sugar. And then all the protein bars. And I was like, wow, you're really going for it. But then after a couple of weeks, he realized he was only going to the gym like once a week. But every day he was eating 3 or 4 of these protein bars, thinking that was going to be the thing. And I was like, mate, you've eaten like 25 tablespoons of sugar today, just on your protein bars. So I would say it's trying to educate yourself. But talking of fitness, I know you interviewed Jocko Willink as well.
Yeah.
And here's someone I remember listening to the London Real podcast. If you do or don't know the London Real podcast.
Yeah, I like him. I forget his name, but he's a good guy.
Yes.
It seems like it. I haven't seen him in a while though. When COVID first came out, he was doing a lot of good episodes with COVID, and then I kind of stopped watching him. But I liked what he was saying.
So he basically launched a kind of a DeFi academy. He's primarily kind of, I wonder whether for him also, because he's been doing it for a long time, and he's followed the similar path to me. He was Wall Street, then he was London. He worked for my competitor as a broker, and then left. And his studios were literally one or two roads away from my office. I've met Brian. I went through his podcast course, been to some of his events, and you're right. The biggest thing for me was that he introduced me to loads of thought-provoking content that I would never have found, and some of it you might not agree with, and some that you did. But at least you went away being like, God, yeah, that's interesting. I'd never have thought of that. And Jocko Willink was one of those I listened to, and I was like, I fucking love this guy. So, what was that like for you?
Kind of similar to Grant Cardone. I mean, I didn't really think he was a dick like I thought Grant Cardone was,
Yeah,
but I did see like some of his interview stuff. He's serious. Like he's a very, I mean, discipline is his big thing. He's a very disciplined, serious man. I think he cracked a smile like maybe once the whole interview, and it was a good hour or so.
yeah,
But he's a good guy. Like he's a really good guy, and he's got a lot of good ideas. He's the type of guy you want having your back. He's the type of guy you want like, alongside of you as you're fighting a battle. I mean, you can imagine he's a big, strong guy anyways, but more so that his mindset is very tough. He's a go-getter. He's very disciplined. He knows what he wants. He goes after it. And he does it in a good way though. I think he's a very respectful man. I think he's a very genuine guy.
yeah.
And he's very serious about what he wants, but he's also respectful in the same sense. And I like him. I think I agree with most of the things he says. He's a conservative type of guy. He
Yeah.
doesn't really talk about politics a lot, but you can tell some of his things that some of the things he believes in are certainly conservative based. And
Yeah.
I think overall he's a great man.
Well, that's been the one of the biggest things I've seen the change in this last 2 years is you can't have an opinion on something because
Yeah.
whether you're and I never really understood much about politics. I mean, even in this country, I just didn't give a shit about it when
Yeah.
I was younger, and it's probably only in the last few years that I started to just look around and pay more attention to it. But that's why, yeah, the podcasts, I like listening to people. I think in life, you need to surround yourself with people that at least challenge you. Because if everybody just says yes, yes, yes all the time, you're not really getting kind of any real criticism. But yeah, definitely with a podcast, I'd listen to people who I deliberately slightly disagreed with, but then it would challenge your thinking. But we said during 2020, and I remember writing about like the Trump and Biden elections and the comedy that ended up being. But like over here, even in this country, I remember writing on our eLetter saying, I guaranteed if I'd have written I was pro one side, you will have some the other side can't just say, oh, fair enough. It's like, and it's so black and white these days
Yeah.
with so much stuff that
Mhm.
that I know, there's that old saying like we can disagree and still be friends.
Yeah.
Um, and I think a lot of people have forgotten that. And what about yourself? Because also with your podcast, you know, what we're trying to impart is also it's okay to be a man's man and be strong and dependable and preside over your family and protect them and etc. Have you found any kind of negative feedback on any of the stuff that you've said, especially about masculinity?
Yeah, I definitely have. It's
Yeah,
it kind of comes with the territory
yeah,
nowadays. And there's always some backlash about being a pro man type of guy. And it's not even like, pro man, because that sort of implies you're anti-woman, which is
yeah,
totally, the opposite of what I am. But it's like, all we're doing here is really talking about men and giving them a place where they can have support,
mhm,
because there's not really a lot of play, and there's a lot more coming up now, but even 5 years ago there wasn't a ton of it. And I do feel like some of those groups that are like, or have been historically like pro man, a lot of them can stray into the territories of being anti-woman.
mhm,
But it's like something I've totally been conscious about avoiding, because it's not what we're about. But we do need a place. We need more places where guys can have support, and they can go for answers, and they can go to talk about the problems that they're dealing with and they're facing as a man. And I do feel society in general has been attacking men and the role that man has in society over the last few decades. And you kind of see it all over the news nowadays, anyways. But it's like a lot of men are being attacked simply because they want to be men. They're not allowed to be dominant anymore, or
yeah,
to be the head of the household, or to be the earners or the providers, like you mentioned. And it's like, traditionally speaking, this is, for hundreds of thousands of years, this is how humanity worked. Man was the leader of the family. Man went out, got the food, they provided for the family, they protected the family. I mean, that's just the dynamic of human nature. And so like to try to think we can change that all within like a couple of years just because like we want to, like, oh, that's not, right. It's, women are equal, and, there's no difference between a man and a woman. It's just bullshit. There is a difference between a man and a woman. Men have their qualities. Women have their qualities. Women are incredibly great with their feminine qualities, and we love that. But men are also incredibly great with their masculine qualities. And we love that. And we should love that and celebrate that. And I think a lot more men need to hear that and figure out that, all right, it's okay for me to stand up and be more vocal and take charge and be more dominant in life.
It's so important, I think, especially for the younger guys who are growing up, who seem to be growing up in a snowflake society. And, that's over here as much as I'm guessing in the States. And I think the media has a big part to play in that, because it can perhaps be quite confusing. But there's two things of that. One is, especially even as young kids growing up, there's no programs they watch where there's a proper male role model. In fact, like, the kids over here might watch, let's say, Peppa Pig, where the daddy's a big fat idiot. And you look at Family Guy, I think, where the guy's a douche. And there's a couple of other examples which I've probably forgotten.
Homer Simpson.
Yeah. I mean, classic example where they're not growing up with the dad that is, talk straight down the line and is respectful, but is a bit of a warrior. It's kind of like dad's a clown, and I can treat him however the fuck I want. The other one of that was I was talking on a panel event a couple of weeks ago, and it's a personal development, how can I put it, like company, but purely for women. And they invited me and 3 other men into a panel event so they could ask us any question they wanted, because they were trying to understand men better, which is about as funny as us trying to understand women. It's just impossible. But it was really interesting because, they wrote out maybe 60 different questions, and we sat for an hour up on stage, and all these women asked us these questions. And it showed you how much, for them, they wanted to understand what we were thinking about this situation where men are feeling kind of slightly persecuted to be a man and a real man. And one of the women at the end, one of the last questions was, if you could have the ears of every woman in the world, what would you tell her? And my answer was, be okay embracing your femininity. Like, we're not here as your enemy. We're all here to kind of work together. And as you say, mum has her qualities, mum energy, and dad energy is completely different. And one of the women stood up and burst into tears, and she said, it didn't say exactly what, but she said, you've healed a wound that I've carried for years. Because I think for some women, they're trying to bring masculinity into their, the persona, and it goes against everything they've got. So I just wondered for you whether you see that over there.
Yeah, 100%. And I actually interviewed John Gray, as I mentioned earlier, the guy who wrote Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Yeah. Incredible. And I've actually had him on the show like 3 times. He's a super intelligent guy. And he's actually another guy who's like so interesting, because he's so knowledgeable in so many different areas. Like, he's a super genius in health too. As opposed, also alongside being the relationship guy and, and business guy. He's just very, very intelligent. But one of the things he talks about, and he gets a lot of flack for it too, even though a lot of women love this guy, some women will give him a lot of shit for it. But it's like, as soon as you introduced women into being into the workforce in like the 50s, 60s, after that era, the whole dynamic of family relationships started to change, where you made women want to have to go out and work 40 plus hours and become part of the providing family, as opposed to the women staying home and being the nurturer and the caretaker. The woman was now put into the workforce and forced to work just as much as the father was. Now, obviously the children suffered for that because the parents weren't home. And then slowly this developed into like the daycare babies. But also there's the dynamic between the wife and the husband changed as well, where the woman was always out thinking she had to be more like the masculine provider. And the man was feminized slightly because she became more of this masculine provider, and he became less of the provider and less of that man that he was supposed to be, where he was the provider. So this dynamic just kind of evolved in the last few decades. And you see where it is today. Not like there's anything wrong at all with women joining the workforce and wanting to, improve themselves and better themselves. But when it comes to a family and it comes to a family dynamic, things do change, where women shouldn't be working as much if they want to focus more on the family. If they have a newborn, like there was a CEO, I think it was Yahoo or something like that. There was this female CEO a few years ago, and they were like celebrating, or all in the news about how she's such a hard worker and she just had a newborn. And, a week before, I'm kind of, mixing up the timelines here, but it's essentially, a week before she just had her newborn baby and she's already back at work, working 90 hours a week at, Yahoo, whatever company it was. And it's like, there's something wrong with that.
Yeah.
I'm all about, having women work hard if they want to, and they're go-getters and this and that.
Yeah.
But when you just had a newborn child, you should be at home with that child, taking,
True.
months off to nurture that child and take care of that baby and be, the mother and the wife that you signed up to be, not to see like what's more important, your family or the profits that Yahoo's making. At that point, you're really prioritizing the profits. You're prioritizing money over family. And there's something, inherently wrong with that. And I see it over and over again with how the dynamics of family have been changing over the last few decades. And I think it is a big problem, especially when you see like this younger generation, the snowflake generation, as you called it, that are coming up, these Gen Zs, even the millennials, but the Gen Zs as well, where it's like a lot of these people didn't have the mother around, or they didn't have and a lot of, different topic, but also a lot of these, especially in like the Black community in America, they didn't have a father around. Yeah. And that's a big problem when you're talking about raising a child. If you don't have a mother around to nurture, or if you don't have a father around to give the discipline and structure, you end up having these babies that grow up to be, have troublesome adults with a lot of problems.
There's multiple things, but like kind of ways we could go with that. I always said that a couple of my friends who would happily admit that they were a bit kind of, and men I'm talking about that had various issues as they were growing up. Like they either didn't know their dad because he was never around, or they knew his dad and he was a complete bastard. So therefore they would have done better off not knowing him because he was terrible. And it is interesting how you could see the pattern of those guys would often be the ones that then of a night out would end up in fights with people and were angry and had that anger that I'd be like, what are you doing? Like, and they just couldn't handle it. The other thing was, like you say, like the breakup of the family unit, which has slowly been happening. I remember, I think it was the director of Trading Places, the film, where he said that, women had been encouraged to go out to work because, of course, there was only one taxpayer, being the man. Whereas once women were going out to work as well, now you've got two people paying tax.
That's a good point.
and I believe it was the Rockefellers who were the ones that said that they would bring that in. Plus, as you said, then you create what it was a term in this country, but I don't know if you had it said, it's called a latchkey kid, which meant you came home from school and mummy and daddy weren't there because they were both working. So you had to put your hand in your letterbox and the key would be dangling down and you get it out on the latch, your key, and open the door and let yourself in, instead of coming home to mum with, maybe some food on the table and a cuddle and, something like that. So that's what we saw over here, was that, big increase in, as you say, kids growing up with disjointed families, which is sad, I think. But whether that's changing or not, I don't know. But I like talking about it on the podcast because often I see the other reason being that we're so driven to assume that, having more is better, and therefore people will sacrifice not having as much money so they can spend time with their family, and they'd rather have nice cars and a big house to be able to put it on Instagram, but sacrifice time with their kids.
It's incredible, man. It's really it's priority. I think it's a lot of the brainwashing that goes on for years that these people have, where they can't really snap out of, like, they see it all the time. They want, especially now more than ever on Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat. Oh, all these people around me have all these nice things, these celebrities, these, friends of mine, they just got a brand new car. They got this, they got that. They're flying here. They're going to the vacations. And it's a brainwashing in a sense that goes on, where they think that they need that. They think that that's what they need to be happy. Yeah. And they forget about their kid, or they're working so hard and they're doing stuff and the kid's on, the other side of the room on his phone the whole time because the parent isn't giving him any attention anyways. Yeah. So it's like, and you see it all the time, these kids walking around with cell phones on. It's like, where's the parent here? And I know most of these people are good people, like they're good parents, but they're just not paying enough attention to the child and giving that child the attention that they need to really be involved in their life.
That lack of connectivity, if that's the right word. And I was going to ask you, the next question was going to go on to, what your relationship is with social media. But great example, when I was traveling to London last week, because I'm an hour and a half out of London, my partner's parents live in central London, so I can stay at theirs whenever I need time out. So I went on the train, just a short journey, and I was sitting there with my phone in my pocket, and I counted, because I was doing a talk on loneliness and connectivity that day to a big kind of media company. So I was looking around to see my inspiration, and I counted 12 people in a row, and I've got this as my prop, but 12 people in a row sitting on the train, all like this.
Yeah. Oh, it's unbelievable.
And it was kind of weird, because you're like, our trains now have got very long, and a lot of them don't have kind of breaks necessarily in them, so you can have longer seats. And it was just kind of scary, because you look and you're like, 15 years ago, you'd have never have seen that. And maybe people read the paper, or people might even talk to each other. But it literally was, and no wonder that people are feeling lonely, lack of connectivity. I spoke at the event. Obviously, it affects mental health. Why is the biggest thing in prison, the biggest punishment they can give you is sitting in the cell?
Isolation.
Yeah, isolation. So I just wondered, what's your kind of been relationship like with social media? Because I see you don't put much on your Instagram, and I use the Whole Man Academy for hours, and I put the odd thing on my personal one, but that stopped me from spending hours just getting sucked down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I post infrequently, like you probably noticed I'll go on, one time a week, and I'll post a few things that day, and then I'll kind of disappear for a couple of days, and then I'll come back on, a week later, whatever. I go on a few times a week. But I do try to limit it as much as I can. And maybe one day, when I blow up and have millions of followers, I'll just have someone entirely take over it and do it for me. That's kind of the goal, honestly, because they can just, constantly post, and I don't have to be involved with it all the time. But I generally like to try to avoid the phone as much as I can, especially social media. It's just, there's a lot of negative that comes with it. There's obviously a lot of good that comes with it, and you can, build a brand and all those things, which is why I actually use it. But I'll be quite honest, I'd be happy if I could have the business and then just go off and kind of disappear from social media for a month at a time, 2 months at a time, and just kind of like almost cleanse myself from all the distraction of the social media. Like, I'd be so happy to just, not even post about stuff, and then just have somebody else do it for me, and that's it. But there comes a lot of good with it. There, definitely is a lot of good things that come with it, as far as getting your name out, your voice out, your message out. But I try to avoid it as much as I can, because I do know the pitfalls of it, and the fact that, like, you're talking about it earlier. You looked around, there was 12 people all in a row. They had their eyes on their phone, and it's like, it kind of seems like a Twilight Zone episode. Like, you woke up in this like new world, and it's like, what the hell, what the hell is wrong with these people? Like, am I the only sane person here? Why is everyone obsessed with this machine that they're sticking their face into for hours at a time? And then you look around, and it's like, the adults are doing it. The grandparents are doing it now. The kids are all doing it. There's 5-6-year-old kids everywhere you look that are stuck to this machine. Yeah. And it's like, nobody's actually living in the real world anymore. And it's scary.
It is. And that's one of the things I spoke about was, we're being pushed towards I call it a contactless society.
Yeah.
And only in the last week, one of the supermarkets, one of the big chains, they've already been slowly implementing, checkouts that are the automatic without someone there, the automated ones. But I saw where today it was reported that certain places you won't, you'll be able to, they'll start doing like facial recognition, so you can pay with that, or fingerprints instead of even a debit or credit card, which means cash disappears as well.
Yeah, it's not good.
Which is not good. And it's so funny, because I can talk to some people, and I always say, I've done lots of research. I say lots. It's probably 5 years ago I started reading books on that they will take cash away, and it will mean that you're completely controllable, because 100%. You won't be able to have your own. You can never touch your own money. And I spoke to a lady, a couple of months ago, and she said, "Oh, it'd be great when there's no cash, because cash is dirty and what have you." And I probably gave her about 10 examples of why cash is still important, and she was like, "Yeah, I've never thought of that." And I said, "Well, most people won't, but even for kids, how do you teach them value of money when it's just beep, a tap on a card or a fingerprint or an eyeball?"
Yeah.
Compared to actually having cold hard cash. So I was going to ask you, that's why it's interesting to talk to guys around the world. we're seeing even our local garden centre is like, we would not take cash. We just would not, full stop. So I wondered for you there, is it the same, or is it kind of, do people fight back from that?
Well, yeah, they're actually starting to do that a little bit. I can see it. They're starting to wean it out of society. And I got a Target right next to my complex over here,
Yeah.
and just a few weeks ago they have all like the self checkouts, which is what I actually like to go to, because I kind of just go in, zip in and zip out. I don't want to like stand in line, and like if there's a self checkout open, which there usually is, I'll
Yeah.
just run in and do it quick
Yeah,
and
it's
leave.
convenient. Yeah.
Yeah, it's convenient. And I don't have to scan my eyeball. I just ring things up and I put my money in, and that's it. And actually I yeah, I like to use cash, sometimes when I'm there. But I noticed that all the self checkouts now are only credit card.
Mm.
You can only do credit card on them now. And they leave you there's like one cash register open with the lady, scanning your stuff. And she's all the way in like the corner over there. And there's like 5 people in line, because, they don't want to like ring it in themselves. So they just want to go for that reason, assuming, but that there's always like 5 people in that line. So it's way faster to go to the self checkout. But now it's like, all right, my only option to use cash, if I want to use cash, is to wait in line for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or I can just use a credit card. So that's what they're doing. They're making you kind of choose this faster, simpler way.
Yeah.
And that's the credit card. And eventually that lady isn't going to be there in, a year or two, and it's just going to be all credit card.
Oh, it's quite scary. I mean, I remember listening to, I think it was Peter Diamantis, if I pronounce his name correctly.
Yeah.
It was at the Tony Robbins event. I mean, that was 5-6 years ago, and he spoke about, investments were very wise in that. Whether you agreed with that, it was a good thing for society to have the contactless society, but he was discussing the fact that at one point you'll be in an Uber or a driverless car, because there'll be no actual drive. You won't be driving a car, and of course it'll know all your details because you had to have them all online to be able to get the car. And as you drive past a shop, or it will advertise exactly to you, because it knows that you were looking at this stuff on your phone earlier, or you'll walk in a shop and it will be like, the facial recognition will say, oh, there's Justin. Justin was looking at certain boxing gloves earlier. There's flash up. There's a 40% flash sale on, and you'll be like, whoa. And it was just like, wow, that, the world's never been more connected, but also the world is going to be very connected soon. And it's more so for my kids. Our boys are nearly 3, nearly 5, and I don't think they'll ever drive a car,
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Which again, as a man, I'm not saying women don't enjoy it, but a lot of men love cars, and that's one of those things that who hasn't enjoyed tearing around in some shitty car to start with and trying to buy something, a convertible or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, and there's something to be said about that too. It's the same kind of argument as the cashless society, where they can control everything because it's all computerized. And, I think it's for nefarious purposes, whether you want to go down that road or not. But I do believe that they're getting rid of the cash for nefarious purposes, the people in power who make a lot of these decisions behind the scenes. But they can also do like the social credit score. You ever heard of that? Where it's like, all right, if you go against like what we believe in, the people in power, we can cut off your money supply, because you don't have cash anymore. We don't accept cash. We accept, these credit cards, these numbers that we give out. And especially like now with the times in America where things are collapsing economically, inflation's through the roof, highest it's been in over 40 years. And
what percentage is your inflation at the moment? I'll tell you why, because
I think it was over 8%. It's going up and up.
They reported 9% yesterday over in the UK, which is absolute bollocks. It's much higher than that. But what they've done, they've manipulated the previous data, or the way they collect the data and present it, so they can say, oh, it's not as high. And you're like,
yeah. I know. Clearly, it's more than that. I mean, you go to the grocery store, I'm paying double what I paid last year, 2 years ago, probably 2 years ago. You go to the grocery store, you're paying literally double what you paid 2 years ago. That's not an 8%, 9% increase. That's double. That's a double. Yeah, exactly. I mean,
what about a great example? And again, that's why it's good to talk to you over there. Like I was going to ask about, fuel, and for example, with us with oil, like our house is oil-fired heating. To fill up our tank 3 months ago would have cost me £450. We just had to do the same. It was £1,000. So
see, there you go.
Double the price it's
incredible.
In 2 or 3 months. Our electricity's gone from £80 a month to £180 a month.
Wow.
Like that.
Wow.
So I wondered if that's similar to what you're getting in the States, those kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. And gas prices were like right now they're like 460 something. I just saw a couple minutes ago. 2 years ago, it was in the twos. It was like low twos, like 210,
Yeah.
215. Now it's like
Right.
460.
Oh,
And you're
what the
like, what
fuck?
the hell? Yeah.
Yeah.
And they just keep going up and up. And it's like, oh, well, there's no gas problem. And, we don't need to open up the pipeline and, drill our own gas. We'll figure it out. It's like, yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. It's like, you guys aren't figuring shit out. It's just getting worse and worse. And it's getting worse and worse globally.
Mm.
And,
And the poor will hurt first, won't they?
the what?
Poor people will hurt first.
Oh yeah, it's these billionaires and the people in Wall Street and all these execs and the people who bribe a lot of these politicians before they get into office and they pay them off while they're in office to pass bills in their favor.
Yeah.
Those guys ain't hurting. They don't care if gas is $20 a gallon because they have so much money. It's
Just
the people.
inconvenient, and that's it. Yeah.
Exactly. It's the hardworking people, the poor people, the middle class people that have to actually suffer when they don't have that extra $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, $10,000 at the end of the year that they had before, that they were relying on for certain bills to be paid. Those are the people who are suffering.
Man, it's a crazy time. And do you know what? On that, I know what I wanted to touch. I appreciate I've already gone over the time I told you I'd be with you. So
That's all right, man.
one last question was about testosterone levels, because we've spoken a bit with different guys, and it's really interesting because I'm guessing you're going to know a lot about it. And it's funny when I speak to other guys who do, but you speak to the man on the street and they don't even know that testosterone levels have even declined in 50 years, let alone halved. And the graph is like that. So I just wonder if you could kind of talk from your experience on that.
Well, yeah, I mean, testosterone levels have dramatically declined in the last few decades, and a lot of that is actually kind of similar to a lot of the things we've touched on in today's episode. Believe it or not, you get more testosterone production when you do something manly. When you're with your spouse, your girlfriend, your wife, and you have sex with her, for instance, your testosterone levels will spike the next few days. When you're like taking care of her, or like you stand up for yourself, like say you go out and like there's a confrontation and like you speak up and like you're the man in that situation and you handle it. Your testosterone levels rise. The same thing with women. Her oxytocin levels rise. Her estrogen levels rise when she does like feminine things, when she's more nurturing, when she's more caring, when she kisses you, her oxytocin levels go up, the estrogen levels go up. When you kiss a woman, your testosterone levels go up as well as a man. So it's like, and doing things outside, manly things like chopping wood, hunting, playing sports, building things with your hands, fixing the car, any and all these things actually increase your testosterone levels as a man. Any of the physically challenging things will your testosterone as a man. And it's these levels have declined because everyone's becoming more feminized. Men are becoming more feminized, as we talked about, and they're doing less and less quote unquote manly things. But it's those manly things that keep those testosterone levels high. And it's, the physical work and the actual labor and the building things with your hands that actually increase your testosterone levels throughout the day and throughout the weeks and years. And everyone's sitting at home, being keyboard warriors or going into the office, being sedentary. Yeah. Or like we talked about, being on your phone all day, their testosterone levels are crashing. So it's getting back to a lot of these things that we talked about traditionally of being more outside and being more physical and having a sport. I recommend a martial art, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, boxing, even, if you can do it safely. But, something physical like that, where you're testing yourself, where you're competing against other men, all of these things will bring that testosterone level up naturally. And a lot of these guys are missing it these days. That's why their testosterone levels are like, that of women 50 years ago. It's joke.
Well, and that's the interesting thing. I know, so my partner is a naturopathic nutritionist. So she's been down these rabbit holes of how it's by design that it's happening for many years. And I kind of, took more interest in it in the last few years. And also the levels of estrogen for men and our environment. I know, when you look around most people's home, if you've got carpet, it's got like shit chemicals in it. The paint's got crap chemicals. The food shit in it. Artificial light. The clothes are not real. all these different things, looking at screens all day, and it fucking your sleep up, and then you're having crap sleep, and that affects your testosterone levels. And it is literally like it's like you look around and people are in a bubble of, I was thinking like a bubble that's keeping them down. Because for men, often my frustration is when a man's really trying his best, but he's ill-informed, so therefore he's trying to do his best to, you know, be healthy and etc. But he's been given shit advice via the magazines and the doctors and what have you, which is why podcasts like yourself and what I try and do at least gives him a fighting chance of kind of coming, you know, making a comeback, especially in his I know in his 40s and 50s. But well, look, I'm going to let you go. So I appreciate your time, and we've already gone on for your hour. And also, I know we tried to get a podcast going a while ago, but I'm so pleased to speak to you, because for me, it's about connecting to guys with similar mindsets all around the world. And it was over a year ago, or at least, I wrote a long list of guys, and you were one of the people on that list. I was like, you know, at some point I will connect with Justin and sit down for an hour of man chat. So I appreciate you and your time. And what's your plan for the rest of today?
Thanks, man. I'm honored, man. I appreciate it. My plan the rest of the day is just I got some videos to shoot, a couple of things I got to write up, and you know, take it easy. But yeah, I appreciate it, man. It's been a fantastic time with you. And let me just leave a couple quick little tips, because you mentioned a lot of good things with the testosterone thing, a lot of environmental things and toxins, and, you know, the plastics that get in your system that produce more estrogen as a man and lower your testosterone levels. Nettle leaf is incredible for your hormones as a man, balancing those out, including testosterone. Ashwagandha is also incredible. I love that. Take it every day. And then if you really want, Dr. John Gray recommends Tongkat Ali to actually boost the testosterone levels itself. So that's like independent of hormones.
I've never heard of that. What is it?
Yeah, Tongkat Ali. It's like Tong, TONGKAT, and then Ali, like Muhammad Ali.
Right.
Tongkat Ali. Yeah. That one's for testosterone. But, you know, you take all these things in combination, you have the right diet, the right nutrition, you'll be, and then be more active, as we talked about, reduce some of these environmental problems. You'll be able to boost that testosterone up pretty easily and naturally too, as opposed to doing hormone replacement, which is really not healthy in the long run. But yeah, man, I really appreciate your time. It was a great chat, and you know, I'm happy we went over the time, because it was a good talk, and these are valuable.
No, I appreciate it. Well, hopefully, I always say to guys, one day we'll meet and give you a man hug, and either see you over in the States or see you over in London. So you'll always be welcome to come over and have a coffee and a chat at some point.
Same to you, man. Let me know if you're ever in Boston.
Lovely. Thank you, mate. Cheers, Justin.
All right, man. Take care. Bye.
Thanks for listening. Remember to sign up to our game-changing weekly e-letter that's read by men around the world. Sign up at wholemanacademy.com/movement. Until next time.